He was only 12 years old when the tiara of the Pope was placed on his head, an absolute record. Before and after Benedict IX, the throne of St. Peter was primarily occupied by seasoned elders. So how did Count Tusculum, his name in the world, become an exception? Because in the 11th century, this teenager's family was shaping the destinies of the world. Theophylact III, Count Tusculum, was born around the year 1012, though no one knows the exact date. According to other sources, the future pope was born 8 years later, no earlier than 1020. The surname Tusculum resonated loudly in Rome and throughout Europe. This family produced two popes, Benedict VIII and John XIX. The power of the Tusculum family was immense, as the Holy See at the turn of the 10th and 11th centuries could influence not only priests but also kings and emperors. The history of Europe was being crafted in Rome. Theophylact grew up as a charming blonde boy with striking blue eyes. Naturally, from a young age, his family prepared him for a future brilliant role, if not as the ruler of Rome, then at least as the heir to the powerful Tusculum lineage. And of course, Theophylact quickly became aware of his own greatness. He lived in a luxurious palace, dressed only in silk and velvet, and witnessed how the residents of the Eternal City bowed before him in servitude. It was enough to make anyone dizzy. Meanwhile, his uncle, Pope John, was not faring well. He was a very greedy man who, as the saying went, tried to profit from every situation. Occasionally, he acted with foresight. He helped Conrad II ascend to the throne of the Holy Roman Empire, who would later serve the Holy See on multiple occasions. However, John's greed drew sharp condemnation from most people in Rome. It is unclear exactly how the uprising ignited, but the pontiff was killed by an enraged mob. One might think that the Tusculum family would be better off leaving the Eternal City. Not at all. They were still strong. The rebellion was suppressed, and a new candidate for the papacy needed to be chosen immediately. But there was one problem. There simply wasn't a suitable candidate within the family. No one had anticipated that John would leave this earthly realm prematurely. The only one available was the 12-year-old Theophylact. 2 months after his uncle's funeral, on January 1st, 1033, the teenager donned the tiara and became the ruler of Rome. Of course, a boy who had not yet completed his education could not navigate the intricacies of political affairs, both spiritual and secular. His main advisors were his father, Count Alberich III, and his older brother Gregory, who at that time was elected as a Roman senator. The older relative's first recommendation to Benedict IX, now officially the name of Theophylact, was to establish relations with the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Conrad owed Rome, and it was essential to secure his support as soon as possible in case of another uprising. Moreover, there were still those on the Italian peninsula who opposed the rule of the Tusculum family. The main adversary of Rome became Archbishop Aribert of Milan. He aimed to demand independence from papal authority and spread rumors about the corruption directly linked to the Tusculums. Naturally, this was a dangerous endeavor. Rome's response was swift. Benedict IX, relying on Emperor Conrad, excommunicated Aribert. No one dared to stand against such power. However, within the walls of Castel Sant'Angelo, which at that time did not belong to the Holy See, a new conspiracy was brewing. The Crescenzi family, once influential and powerful, longed to reclaim their former position. Intrigues began to unfold. Messages were sent from the castle to other disgruntled factions, and gold flowed from the Crescenzi coffers to those who could wield weapons. Thus, in September of the year 1044, a new uprising erupted in Rome, forcing Benedict to flee. The vacant papal seat was filled by the puppet Sylvester III, about whom little is known except that he was loyal to the Crescenzi family. However, the hopes of the new rulers of Rome were dashed. Sylvester proved to be an even worse spiritual leader and administrator, and the chaos in the Eternal City not only continued but multiplied exponentially. In an unprecedented turn of events, Benedict was called back. Remarkably, it was the very same people who had contributed to his downfall. Therefore, on February 10th, 1045, Benedict IX, Theophylact Tusculum, ascended to the Holy See once more. Meanwhile, the young pontiff showed no desire to govern. He was annoyed by his puppet-like role, manipulated by his relatives, and his tender age, just 25, led him to pursue entirely different interests. The Pope became infatuated with women. Understandably so, at that age. Beautiful women firmly established themselves in the papal palace, despite the protests of Benedict's family. Whispers circulated that the Pope had gathered an entire harem and lived in the luxury of an Eastern sultan. He contemplated resigning, but realized that doing so would be nearly impossible. So, he devised another plan. He decided to sell his tiara. Giovanni Graziano paid a handsome sum for it. Throwing caution to the wind, Pope Benedict helped him get elected under the name Gregory VI in May of 1045. The Tusculum family was furious. The young pope had effortlessly dismantled the power they had worked for decades to build. To settle the matter, Emperor Henry III was chosen as the judge, and he summoned the three pontiffs, Sylvester, Benedict, and the new Pope Gregory, to a council in Sutri. It was abundantly clear that Gregory would be publicly humiliated, so Theophylact Tusculum, the former Pope Benedict, chose not to attend the council. Sylvester informed the emperor that he was no longer interested in Rome or any other affairs and intended to dedicate himself to monastic life. Unfortunately for him, before the emperor and the furious members of the Tusculum family stood Pope Gregory, who had purchased the tiara. He became the target of their ire. The pontiff admitted to the unworthy manner in which he had obtained his power, and he was immediately stripped of his office and new elections for a pope were announced. I won't bore you with the name of the next pontiff, as this individual did not linger long in the pages of history. He passed away suddenly shortly after being elected. So who was left? Ironically, it was none other than Benedict IX. After enjoying his newfound freedom and receiving a stern lecture from his brother and other relatives, Theophylact Tusculum returned to Rome. By November 8th of the year 1047, the pontiff had reclaimed his place in the palace. He was only 27 years old and had already been pope 3 times. However, the Tusculum family failed to realize that all these papal changes had greatly fatigued the people of Rome and Europeans in general. The emperor also had no desire to support Benedict. Therefore, when a new uprising broke out in the Eternal City, he chose not to intervene. Benedict was deposed, this time for good, and excommunicated just to be safe. Now he posed no threat to the Holy See. It was said that Benedict did not accept his fate quietly. He plotted and attempted to gather forces to reclaim Rome. But these far-reaching plans likely came from his relatives rather than him. The former pope himself lived a quiet life in a monastery, while the Tusculum family put forth their candidates for the papacy 2 more times. Pope Benedict died at the age of 35 in the Abbey of Grottaferrata. Later chroniclers frequently depicted him in the darkest terms. Yet, let's not forget the circumstances of his reign and his tender age. Someone who stands at the pinnacle of the world at 12 rarely has the capacity to accurately assess their role in it and their actions.